Good morning, Leonard. How are you?
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Uncover with Dale and taking the time to do this interview on your lovely Sunday. Thank you. Before we begin, let's just dive. I know you served over 30 years. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, and then we'll go into your service as a responder.
Okay, so I'm British and I was born in a suburb of Liverpool. I think most of your listeners will know where Liverpool is, a major UK city, a port, seaport. And I was born in the outskirts. It's a working class family and to a Roman Catholic grammar school there called St. Francis Xavier's. I was taught by the Jesuits.
Okay.
And that gave me a fairly good grounding, I think, in Catholicism and hopefully argument. When I left there, just before I left, I was in the sixth form. I had a decision: should I go to university or not? But unfortunately, my wife Pat, she intervened, and I met her, and then I didn't want to go to university school and joined police instead, Merseyside Police, which is the local force.
Okay. Well, you served over 30 years, correct?
I did. So I joined in the December of 1975. The way the police forces are made up here in the UK is that there are 43. Each force covers like a county area. So I suppose it's like a city plus the hinterland around it. And it's a separate force. So each city has its own separate police force. It's not like the US with perhaps multiple police forces within one jurisdiction within the city and the hinterland, the area around Liverpool. I joined in 75, did my necessary 2 years walking the streets and checking property and arresting malefactors. And then I was selected to go on a sort of an elite squad. Was my partner in this elite unit. We were crime patrols and public order patrols at the same time. So a cross between a SWAT team and Starsky and Hutch. We all wanted to be Starsky and Hutch in those days.
Yeah.
Did that for 5 years, and then I was promoted to a sergeant, and then actually quite quickly promoted to inspector, which I suppose is the equivalent. Inspectors are different in the States, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, maybe a lieutenant.
Yeah, so I suppose an inspector is an equivalent to lieutenant. And then I went to work in the British Home Office. So I was taken away from Liverpool and I went to work in a bigger county called Yorkshire, where I was working for the Home Office in essential training, design, and training instructors. I spent some time there and then went back to Liverpool to be a lieutenant. And I suppose at that time I was addicted to Hill Street Blues, which Hill Street Blues is the most remarkably accurate TV program about the police I've ever seen, and was actually pretty close to my reality, really, I think, even though it was set in the States.
Now, policing exposes you to both the worst and best in humanity. How did that tension shape your understanding of justice and mercy? What was your experience?
As a police officer, you have to balance your duty against sometimes I think the balance of being a police officer is to balance pragmatism and trying to do right. In the essence of a police officer, I think, in the UK, we call it keeping the peace. So the best example I have really is it's a constant battle. Every day you come into work, you have to balance if somebody comes along and they're infringing the law, do you take action against that infringement? Or do you have to? One of the things I've always struggled with in terms of the United States, policing in the United States vis-a-vis policing in the United Kingdom, is that the American police call themselves law enforcement. The police are law enforcement. And in the UK, we don't regard ourselves as principally law enforcers. We regard ourselves principally as keepers of the peace.
Yes, I like that.
And fundamentally, that really is a fundamental difference. But in the UK, we take a different view. We think, okay, they may have broken the law, but is this actually is it better for the community? Is it better for society? Is it better for the individual? Is it better for us as police officers to turn a blind eye, to warn, to
Have empathy and mercy.
deal with it in a much more merciful way?
Yeah.
And just because they've broken the law, we don't have to take action.
Was there a point in your career when faith and law collided in a way that changed you? Was there a moment that shaped you as a person?
In terms of religious faith,
I'm sorry?
do you mean in terms of religious faith?
Yes, correct. Your religious faith.
Well, I suppose I was brought up a Catholic. I am Roman Catholic. And Liverpool, like old style New York, was very fundamentally Irish in its feeling. I was more of what I might call a cultural Catholic than a religious Catholic. When I joined the police, I was a cultural Catholic, and my responsibility was suddenly to the UK state. Time in the 70s, we were going through a difficult time with the problems in Northern Ireland, as your listeners may know. There was a lot of social unrest, which started at the back end of the 60s. And by 1975, the IRA, the Irish Republican Army and Provisionals of them in Northern Ireland, had started a bombing campaign on the UK mainland. And that was the reality that I walked into when I joined the police. And so
Yeah.
IRA got a lot of support from the Irish diaspora Roman Catholic community within Liverpool. My grandmother herself was Irish and very Republican Irish at that. And I had aunties and uncles whose sympathies lay really with the Irish cause. And I suddenly, in joining the police, was representing the English, primarily English British state, trying to mitigate some of the harms perhaps that the IRA were doing to the community. And that put me in conflict. It put me into conflict, cultural conflict between my Irish Catholicism, my cultural Catholicism, and my responsibilities to the non-Catholic wider English British community, which was very uncomfortable, really, because I found that within a year, really, whereas I used to be invited to parties and things by the family, and I come from a big family, and lots of aunties and uncles, lots of cousins. Suddenly, I never got invited to things because I was a policeman, and that had the effect both of changing my perspective on my own cultural values. What happens if you join an organization like the police, all your friends are police officers, all the people you marry are police officers or nurses in my wife's case.
Yeah.
Many people you mix with are emergency workers, and it became more and more focused. That has the positive effect, increasing the cohesion of the force and your own loyalty to the force.
Yeah.
Potentially making you turn a blind eye to things that you shouldn't be turning a blind eye to, or bad behavior, which shouldn't be tolerated and should be challenged. But because you are in this pressure cooker of Amelia, you're inclined to let things slide. And that takes an awful lot of moral courage to actually step up, really.
Now, I know, Leonard, you touched on your international humanitarian work, but just to go back to that, after police and you transitioned into international development, humanitarian consulting, and you've worked in fragile and conflicted areas across Africa, Middle East, South Asia. What did those environments teach you about human resilience?
Oh, goodness me. God, that's a big question, Dale.
Yeah.
Well, I retired as a chief inspector. Now, I suppose that's not quite a captain, but probably getting there, really. And my first job was in Sierra Leone, where I worked with Rudy from Texas. and then across Africa and the Middle East and Pakistan and South Asia. I was 50 when I started that. So it was a new life. I'd been married since I was 20. I got married when I was 21. I had 6 children. I had several grandchildren by then.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I was whisked away to work away from home, a continents away, when the internet was really in its infancy. All I had was Skype, the Skype call once a week or twice a week. And it was difficult to live on my own, not be sucked into the life of a single man. I needed to draw on my own family values, the love that I have for my wife, my family, and really to draw on my inner strength, I think, really. Because otherwise, you can drink too much, you can smoke too much, you can indulge generally too much.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody to stop you. You're your own boss. And added to that, all of a sudden, I was getting 3 times the salary that I had been getting as a police officer because it was all contract foreign work. And I saw so many men fall by the wayside. The numbers of divorces, marriages going on the rocks, men in front of my eyes becoming alcoholics. It was quite sad, really, in a way.
Yeah. So community is so important, and sounds like your family was your anchor.
Oh, absolutely. My family's always been my anchor. I was 21 when we got married. I met my wife when I was just 17 and she was 16. And we've been all together since, what is it, 52 years now. So it's a long time. And really, my family is my whole life, really.
And do you think the policing experience prepared you for those?
Challenges away from home.
Do you think it prepared you in a way?
Because, I mean, there's an issue about moral strength. I think that's what I'm talking about, really. I saw, when I was a police officer, there was an initial temptation to follow the crowd. So if you're a police officer and you see a more experienced police officer, a person perhaps you look up to, doing something wrong. So if I saw somebody doing something wrong, I found early on, if you challenge it, then you just get isolated.
And you kind of become a lone wolf.
So my way of dealing with it was to move myself away from that situation until I got to a position as a sergeant where I could intervene. I could start to affect other people's behaviours positively. I was only 24 when I became a sergeant. It's then a matter of judgment as to, do you actually deal with the situation, or do you leave it until an opportunity arrives where you can influence that person or event? I remember going on my interview to be a sergeant. You had to be interviewed. You had to pass an exam and then you had to be interviewed. And the question they asked me was, you are a newly promoted sergeant. The people who you're managing, you find out one night that nobody's answering the radio, and you find out that they're all in a pub and you're all drinking on duty. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to get them all into trouble, or what are you going to do about it? And the answer, of course, is, I'm going to report them. That's my job. But I very quickly found out, within days of actually taking over the role, that's not what you do. You can't do that, because the first thing that the hierarchy then do is they then do you failing to supervise people properly. So it's a bit of a catch-22 no-win situation. So you have to very quickly develop strategies to influence people's behaviour rather than take action against them. My second lesson, I think, was when I started working for the Home Office and started training trainers. And I went into training at a time when our training regime within the British Police changed from being instructors in the classic instructor style to being what we called facilitators in a more Hegelian psychological adult education way. We fundamentally changed the training system. In order to prepare us for that, my instructors were American from New York, psychologists from New York. I saw many people who were hard-nosed police officers who came into that training, and they were confronted themselves as part of the process to turn them into trainers. And as a result, it broke them. They shattered like glass. And in order not to shatter like glass, I found the only way to do it was to be more like a tree than to be like a piece of glass.
Yeah.
And you had to bend, and you had to be pragmatic. And that reinforced the first lesson that I'd been with as a sergeant. So that by the time I then retired, with a full career behind me, and then went abroad, how do I deal with the isolation? How do I deal with the temptation to excess? The only way through it is the lessons I'd learned as a sergeant and then later as a trainer, which is to do with self-reliance. So you have to be pragmatic and self-reliant, but always always trust your own core morality. And my core morality has always been reinforced by the family.
Yes.
So I'm trying to wrap up all of the influences that we've just mentioned, really. Without that core, and mine's a family, but other people might have different core. Without that core, it's very easy to go with the crowd and to become influenced. And before you know it, you've gone wrong. You've done something that you shouldn't have done.
And so let's shift a little bit from your police work and international work. History, empire, and identity. You're deeply interested in Roman Britain and the transition to Anglo-Saxon and Welsh polities. What draws you to that particular period?
When I was at school, I was a scientist, believe it or not. So I did chemistry, physics, and biology, but I really wanted to do history, but the teacher was rubbish. So I didn't do history. I ended up doing sciences. However, I've always been interested in history. British history is what we call Whig history. It's written in the early 1800s, and it's standard. The Romans, and then the Romans left one day, and then the Anglo-Saxons arrived. And then the Anglo-Saxons were there until the Normans arrived. And then when the Normans arrived, then we get into the modern day. And we have this bit in the middle called the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages, nobody knows anything about the Dark Ages. It's a mystery. How did we turn from being a Roman society to an Anglo-Saxon society? Almost overnight. I've always wanted to know. And so when I started, I did an Open University course, and I ended up doing a degree in history with a part-time university called the Open University in the UK. And then I got a master's degree and another master's degree. And as a result of that, I did a lot of research. And actually, there's an awful lot of evidence about these Dark Ages. They're not dark at all, really. They're quite bright. There's archaeology and there's DNA evidence these days, and there's all sorts of scientific evidence. And what we've got is we've got a society, a Roman society, which has been stable for ages. And it's not unlike our society, really. It's not unlike the West today. And then all of a sudden, that empire, that security blanket just disappears. And because its own power starts to wane or become, I'm going to use the word corrupt, but I don't mean corrupt in the nasty sense, diluted or changed in some way. And then what happens then is we change the society, and the society changes from one to another. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to focus on how that change happens. Whether we call it failed states, we call it states in transition. And when I was studying it and researching, I published several books about Anglo-Saxon England. And that transition, that failure of a state, that the way people struggle with change is so remarkably like what we're living through now. So when I was born in 1956, Britain still had an empire of sorts. It was only less than 10 years after the Second World War. And now we struggle to even keep hold of Wales and Scotland. It's been my whole life has been living through a political entity, Britain, in transition and in decline. The United States is the new Rome. There's no doubt about it. It's self-consciously the new Rome. The fact that Washington, D.C. looks like Rome. It has all these Roman buildings, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It calls itself the Senate, doesn't it? And the Capitol Hill. And it's self-consciously Roman. It was set up in that way. And its behavior is typically Roman. Julius Caesar was captured once, but when he was a young man, by some pirates. And he was sailing on a Roman ship, and the Roman ship was captured, and he was captured by these pirates, and he was taken to North Africa, where he was eventually ransomed after a few months. He said, "You shouldn't have captured me, and you'll regret capturing me." And it took him 40 years, but eventually he caught them all and had them all executed. 40 years. Most of us would forget about it, wouldn't we? And put it behind us. No, not Julius Caesar, not the Romans. And I look at what's happening now, and I think, do you know, this all started in, was it 1979, when President Carter was the president and people were captured in the US Embassy, and America said they'd get them back one day. Britain's empire, experience of empire, gave British people an innate sense of superiority. So when I was working in Africa, you go to Africa and you have this innate sense of superiority, even though there's no reason for this. But the way you actually see yourself somehow seems to affect how other people see you. Now, it's been quite a difficult process for the British. 50 years ago, when I was a child, we thought we ruled the world. It's quite clear we have no influence at all on the world now. So, although the country is adapting to its lack of power, its lack of influence, as individuals, this comes as a great shock to us when we go to places. For example, we've now got to get an ESTA to come into America, as a visa.
Yes.
Surely they can't reject. We're British. Unfortunately, that's the great shock of.
Yeah.
Don't talk to me like that. I'm British. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you can speak to Mexicans like that, or you can speak to, I don't know, French people like that. But I'm British.
Right.
And that's very difficult to come to terms with.
Navigating an ego.
It's absolutely. That's a good way of putting it there. And
Leonard, how does studying history help us navigate today's political and cultural divisions? History is so important. However, we're seeing it erased here in America. What are your feelings on the importance of history?
History, to me, history is fundamental to our understanding of the present. We are our history. And we just can't get away from it. We can't get away from being the product of the past. It seems wrong to me that the movement, particularly sometimes in progressive circles, where the past is denied. I think you have to look at the past and you have to try and be objective and say, okay, that was the past. These were the influences of the past. These are the norms of the past. And these norms have changed, but we can still learn positive things from even bad things in the past. There's a particular issue with America where statues are torn down, but those statues still mean something to other people. And I think if you're not careful, what you can do is you can raise artificial antagonisms. You can polarize society instead of looking at it and saying, okay, that's the past. That was a thing they did. But those people were not necessarily bad people. They were simply living in their own time. So we have to erase all. We've just got to put them in a museum and say that was interesting, and there are some things that we could learn from them, positively and negatively.
Embrace the good and the bad, and learn.
Polarization is bad for us, isn't it? Really.
So, should we go into the road to Golgotha?
Yes, thank you. Yes, that would be lovely.
Okay, so I'm actually going to pull up your Amazon and add that in the scene with us here.
Okay.
You can give the audience a synopsis of your book here.
And I was in charge of the operations office, and our job was to, when there was a major event, and we have lots of major events in Merseyside, sporting events, political events, that sort of stuff, was to prepare for them. This is the intelligence that's come in. These are the threats. These are the resources that I've got. This is how I'm going to deploy the resources in a strategic and a tactical sense. This is the help that I'll need from other places. The priorities, how am I going to maintain public order at the same time as being law enforcement, and the sort of thing we were talking about before, this continual tension between public order and law enforcement. We used to deal with it every day. Major events would come in, you'd have a major sports event, and you'd be preparing for it for weeks, and then all of a sudden this would be there and this would be gone. And instead of going, oh, that's finished now, right, I'm going home. No, next day, you're preparing for the next one. Life goes on, and all of the things that happened and all the stresses have just got to be put behind you, and let's move on to the next bit of reality. I wonder, was there an operations office when Jesus got crucified? That's an odd thing to think about, but it must have been. So somebody must have been managing the Passover that year when Jesus goes into the temple and overturns all the tables. There must have been some form of a police officer, be Jewish or be Roman, thinking, oh my goodness me, what are we going to do here? Should we remove the troops? Should we arrest this guy? Wait, let's get him arrested. Let's issue a warrant. And I thought, wouldn't this be an interesting take on a book?
I'm curious, how did your decades in policing influence how you view the legal and procedural aspects of Christ's trial?
I suppose the answer to it is the book, the essential tension in the book is that we've got dual administration. So we've got the temple, we've got the Jews, okay. And I know that there was a Jewish police force of sorts in the temple area, which was like half of Jerusalem. And I've also know that there was some form of Roman administration, which didn't really have jurisdiction in the temple, but did. And there's always a tension there between who is in charge. And I don't usually take orders off him. Why should I take orders off him? And I outrank him. I should be following his orders. And there's always this personal tension, as well as professional tension, as well as organizational tension. And this book, The Road to Golgotha, is an expose of that tension. We want to achieve no blasphemy. We want to achieve continued control of our own. We don't want Roman soldiers in our temple. So the priorities are slightly different. Now, so in terms of the trial itself of Jesus, how do those tensions play out? How does Pontius Pilate and Caiaphas, they're the two senior officers in this. Caiaphas, he's in charge of the Jewish temple. He's the high priest. He wants to make sure that the Romans don't interfere in his life. Okay, he wants control. He wants Jesus killed. He's a problem. Okay, let's get rid of him. He's a problem. He just wants to maintain public order. He's got his intelligence officer, and for my book, I've called Simon the Zealot, the spy, if you like, the intelligence officer. His intelligence officer is saying, listen, this bloke isn't a problem. He's a flash in the pan. If we ignore him, if we isolate and ignore him, his movement will go away. We'll maintain public order. Nobody needs to die. Whereas you've got Caiaphas and his secret police going, nope, this guy's got to die. He's got to die. So what does Pilate do? Well, this fella's innocent. If I kill him, I'm going to have a spark that could ignite a civil. How do I deal with this? So the book, hopefully, looks at the trial execution of Christ from these two quite opposed political standpoints, trying to work together and go, how do we square this circle? Just like the guy from the FBI and the guy from the local police have to square the circle when they've both got their own political bosses at loggerheads with each other. So that's what the book's about. Okay, and the book is, Jesus is in the background, really, and it's the personal struggles between the combatants, if you like.
Now, when you examine the crucifixion through the lens of operational law enforcement, Was there anything that surprised you, or what surprised you the most?
Oh, goodness me. One thing really surprised me. I thought I knew the Bible. You probably know the Bible a lot better than that, but I thought I knew the
Oh,
Bible. And I looked at the Gospels. In the Catholic Church, we get a reading from the Gospel every Mass, every Sunday. So this is what surprised me. It all starts with Lazarus. Lazarus, Zacharias incident, and the entry into Jerusalem. Okay? That's the key to all of this. Zacharias. Jesus is a movement. He's a bit of a political threat. The Jewish authorities want to get him in for questioning, but he's not being very easy to lay hands on. He's always surrounded by people. He's not easy to arrest. So then Jesus is in Bethany. The Jewish authorities send some people to arrest him. And from the Roman and Jewish authority point of view, okay, he's decided he's not going to be a flashpoint. He's clearly decided he's going to avoid it, so he doesn't want to be arrested. So he walks all this way, 60 miles, and you can see the police officers involved breathing a bit of a sigh of relief. Oh, he's gone north now. We don't have to worry about him. He walks 60 miles. He gets to the outskirts of Nazareth. There's a load of pilgrims there, people who all come from Galilee who are a little volatile anyway, sort of mountain men, a bit volatile. And then all of a sudden, Jesus decides to link up with all this crowd of Galileans and walk another 60 miles back down to Jerusalem. Now, on the way, just before he gets to Jerusalem, he gets to Jericho. And the tax collector called Zacharias says to Zacharias, and this is in the Bible, "We're staying at your house tonight, Zacharias. Is that okay?" "Oh, please do, Lord." Now, this Zacharias is an agent of the state. He's very rich. And he's basically given an offer he can't refuse. A lobby behind him from Galilee, who've just walked, oddly, 120 miles for no apparent reason, come back to where they started from, is now a clear and present danger. At that point, that turn of events, that 4 days, is what I believe the crucifixion hinges on. Because he's become an actual danger.
There's so much more. We're definitely going to have you back on the show, but just a couple of questions to draw to a conclusion. Did writing this book deepen your faith or challenge it at all?
It deepened my faith, really, to be honest. Looking objectively at the events, I can see that there is something remarkable about Jesus that I'd taken for granted before that. Jesus is remarkable in the message that he gives and his obvious approach to his own death. And he chose not to do that and to die instead.
What do you hope readers take away from the roads to Golgotha?
I hope they enjoy it. I hope it's a nice adventure story for them. And I hope they see another way of looking at the crucifixion that is relevant to the decisions that we have to make on a day-to-day basis. This is, I hope, how people really wrestle with real events and don't simply the compromises they have to make, making a moral judgment and pragmatically dealing with a day-to-day situation that their organization and their duty forces them into.
Yeah. So as our show focuses on stories that uncover resilience, faith, identity, if someone's listening today, Leonard, struggling with faith, justice, or purpose, what would you say to them?
If you're struggling with faith, you have to look at yourself and your own value system and try and figure out what you believe to be right, why it is right, and trust yourself, trust your inner feelings, and trust your judgment, and not be swayed by the slings and arrows of friends, false friends, and the values of society.
Would you like to tell the listeners where we can find your work, Amazon?
So my book, it's on Amazon. It's in Kindle form. In fact, if you're on Kindle Unlimited, it's free. The paperback version is for sale on Amazon. and it's also on Audible. And the person who's narrating it, an American called Boyd Barrett. He's from New Mexico, and he makes an excellent, absolutely superb job of the narration. It's really engaging, really entertaining, and I would urge people to have a listen to it. It's fantastic, and that's on Audible. So on Amazon, on Audible, and on Kindle, and on Apple Books as well.
Okay, great. Thank you again, Leonard. This has been amazing having you on Uncover with Dale. I'm definitely going to have you back, hopefully with Peter as well, so you guys can tell us some good police stories.
It'll be lovely, Dale. I really look forward to it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And